What happens when Hollywood's most beloved nice guy finally reaches his breaking point? What happens when years of keeping quiet about industry corruption and media manipulation come to a head on live television? What happens when Keanu Reeves, known for his calm demeanor and thoughtful responses, decides he's had enough of being talked over and misrepresented? You're about to witness one of the most shocking moments in daytime television history, a confrontation so intense that it ends with a longtime host walking off her own show. Make sure to subscribe and drop your thoughts in the comments, because this story will leave you questioning everything you thought you knew about live television and the power dynamics behind the scenes. The View's studio buzzed with its usual pre-show energy. Joy Behar sat at the familiar table, shuffling through her notes while production assistants scurried around making final adjustments. Today's guest was supposed to be an easy interview, a softball session with Keanu Reeves, promoting his latest film. The producers had specifically requested a light, feel-good segment to balance out the week's heavier political discussions. "Ladies, we're live in 30 seconds, called out the floor manager. Joy straightened in her chair, flashing her practiced smile as the cameras rolled. "Welcome back to The View. I'm here with the incredibly talented Keanu Reeves, who's starring in what I'm sure will be another action-packed blockbuster. Keanu, thank you for joining us." Keanu nodded politely, his hands folded in his lap. "Thank you for having me, Joy. So, tell us about this new movie. I have to say, at your age, aren't you getting a little tired of all these stunts? I mean, when are you going to settle down and do some real acting? Maybe something more mature?" The question hung in the air like a challenge. Keanu's expression remained neutral, but there was a subtle shift in his posture. "Well, Joy, I think physical storytelling has always been a part of cinema. The stunts serve the narrative. They're not just spectacle." For the sake of it, Joy waved her hand dismissively. "Oh, please. We both know these action movies are just mindless entertainment for teenage boys. Don't you want to challenge yourself with something more sophisticated? Something with substance?" "I think you're making some assumptions about both the films and the audiences," Keanu replied, his voice still measured, but with an edge creeping in. "These stories often deal with themes of justice, sacrifice, redemption. They're not as shallow as you're suggesting." Joy leaned forward, clearly enjoying what she perceived as an opportunity to press her point. "Come on, Keanu. You're basically playing the same character over and over again. The strong, silent type who solves everything with violence. Don't you think Hollywood has enough of that toxic masculinity?" "Toxic masculinity?" Keanu repeated, raising an eyebrow. "Joy, I think you're confusing character archetypes with real-world behavior. The characters I play often struggle with violence. They don't celebrate it. They're forced into situations where they have to protect people they care about after." "That's exactly what I'm talking about," Joy interrupted, her voice rising slightly. "This whole notion that violence is the answer, that men have to be the protectors and women need saving, it's outdated and frankly it's harmful." Keanu took a breath. And for the first time in the interview, his diplomatic facade began to crack. "Joy, with respect, I don't think you've actually watched these films. You're attacking ideas that aren't in the movies. You're creating straw man arguments." "Straw man arguments." Joy's laugh was sharp and condescending. "I've been in this business longer than you've been famous. Sweetheart, I know manipulation when I see it, and these movies manipulate young men into thinking violence is heroic." The pet name Sweetheart landed like a slap. Keanu's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "I'm not your sweetheart, Joy, and I'm not manipulating anyone. These are stories about people facing impossible choices and trying to do the right thing, even when it costs them everything." "Oh, now you're lecturing me about storytelling." Joy's voice dripped with mock amusement. "Let me tell you something about real storytelling. It's about human complexity, not about some brooding man with a gun who grunts his way through 2 hours of explosions." "Human complexity," Keanu repeated slowly. "You mean like reducing a person's entire career to a caricature without actually engaging with their work? You mean like dismissing entire genres because they don't fit your narrow definition of what constitutes art?" Joy's smile faltered for just a moment. "I'm not dismissing anything. I'm asking legitimate questions about the kind of content Hollywood keeps pushing on audiences." "No, you're not asking questions," Keanu said, his voice growing stronger. "You're making statements, and then demanding I defend against accusations that have no basis in reality. You've decided what my movies are about without watching them. You've decided what kind of person I am without knowing me, and now you're upset that I won't play along with your predetermined narrative. The studio audience had grown noticeably quiet. Even the other hosts seemed unsure how to intervene in what was becoming an increasingly tense exchange. Joy straightened in her chair, clearly not expecting this level of pushback from someone she'd assumed would be an easy target. I think you're being awfully defensive for someone who claims his movies have depth. If they're so meaningful, why can't you explain that without getting hostile? Hostile. Keanu's voice was still controlled, but there was steel in it now. Joy, you've spent the last 10 minutes insulting my work, my intelligence, and my character. You've made assumptions about my motivations, dismissed my responses, and now you're tone policing me for not accepting your disrespect with a smile. That's not journalism. That's bullying with cameras. The word bullying seemed to hit Joy like a physical blow. Her face flushed red and her voice took on a defensive edge that the regular viewers of The View knew all too well. Bullying? Are you seriously going to sit there and accuse me of bullying? I'm doing my job, which is asking tough questions that my audience wants answered. Your audience? Keanu said, leaning forward slightly. Or your ego? Because from where I'm sitting, it seems like you're more interested in proving how clever you are than actually having a conversation. Joy's laugh was bitter now, all pretense of professional courtesy abandoned. Oh, that's rich. The action star is going to lecture me about intellectual honesty. Tell me, Keanu, when was the last time you had an original thought that wasn't written for you by a team of screenwriters? The insult hung in the air like smoke. Keanu was silent for a long moment, and when he spoke, his voice was quieter, but somehow more powerful. You know what's interesting, Joy? You talk about asking tough questions, but you haven't asked me a single genuine question this entire time. You've made statements disguised as questions. You've created narratives and then demanded I defend against them. I've asked you about your career choices, your artistic integrity. Joy shot back. No, you've told me my career choices are wrong and that I lack artistic integrity. There's a difference. A question would be, what draws you to action films? Or, how do you approach developing these characters? Instead, you've decided I'm some mindless musclehead who's corrupting America's youth, and you want me to either admit that or defend myself against something I've never claimed to be. Joy's co-hosts were exchanging glances now, clearly uncomfortable with the direction the interview had taken. The cameras continued rolling, capturing every moment of what was becoming a masterclass in media manipulation being called out in real time. I think you're being overly sensitive, Joy said, trying to regain control of the conversation. If you can't handle a little criticism, maybe you shouldn't be in the public eye. Criticism, Keanu repeated, and there was something almost dangerous in his calm tone. Is that what you call this? Because criticism implies you've actually examined the work you're critiquing. You've admitted you haven't seen these films, yet you're confident enough to dismiss them and lecture me about their impact on society. I don't need to watch every explosion fest to understand the genre, Joy retorted. And there it is, Keanu said, sitting back in his chair. You don't need to actually engage with the material to have strong opinions about it. You don't need to understand the themes or the craftsmanship or the intentions behind the work. You can just dismiss entire categories of human creative expression because they don't appeal to your personal taste. Joy's voice was rising now, her professional composure cracking. Don't twist my words. I'm talking about the responsibility that comes with influence. When you make movies that glorify violence, you have a responsibility to consider the impact. And when you use your platform to spread uninformed opinions as if they're facts, what's your responsibility? Keanu countered. When you invite someone on your show just to tear them down for entertainment, what message does that send to your audience about how we should treat each other? The question seemed to catch Joy off guard. For a moment, she was speechless. And in that silence, Keanu continued, you talk about influence and responsibility, but you've spent the last 15 minutes demonstrating exactly the kind of toxic behavior you claim to be against. You've been condescending, dismissive, and intellectually dishonest. You've made assumptions about me and my work without doing the basic research that any professional journalist would do. Now, wait just a minute, Joy said, her voice sharp with anger. I've been doing this job for decades. I don't need some Hollywood pretty boy telling me how to be a journalist. There it is again, Keanu said, and now there was something almost sad in his voice. Hollywood pretty boy, you can't engage with my actual arguments, so you resort to personal attacks and dismiss me based on my appearance and profession. Do you see what you're doing? You're proving my point about toxic behavior while accusing me of promoting it. Joy was clearly flustered now, her usual quick wit seeming to abandon her. I'm not attacking you personally. I'm questioning your choices by calling me sweetheart, questioning my intelligence, dismissing my profession, and now calling me a pretty boy. If those aren't personal attacks, what are they? They're observations, Joy said, weakly. Observations based on what? You've admitted you haven't watched my recent work. You clearly haven't researched my background or my approach to film. Yet, you feel qualified to make observations about my character and my impact on society. That's not journalism. Joy, that's prejudice. With a microphone, the studio was dead silent now. Even the production crew seemed frozen, unsure whether to cut to commercial or let this extraordinary moment continue to unfold. Joy looked around the table as if seeking support from her co-hosts, but they seemed as stunned as the audience. I think, Joy said, her voice tight with barely controlled anger, that you're being deliberately difficult and argumentative. Our viewers tune in to see honest conversations, not to watch guests attack the hosts. Keanu's response was swift and devastating in its simplicity. Joy, I haven't attacked you once. I've responded to your attacks on me. I've questioned your methods and pointed out the inconsistencies in your arguments, but I haven't called you names. I haven't dismissed your profession, and I haven't made assumptions about your character. The difference in our behavior here should be obvious to anyone watching. You're being manipulative, Joy accused. But her voice lacked conviction now. How am I being manipulative? By defending myself when you attack me. By asking you to support your claims with evidence. By pointing out when you contradict yourself. If that's manipulation, then what would you call what you've been doing to me for the past 20 minutes? The question hung in the air like a sword. Joy's face cycled through several expressions: anger, confusion, embarrassment before settling on something that looked almost desperate. She glanced at the teleprompter, then at her notes, as if searching for an escape route that didn't exist. I think we need to move on, she said finally, her voice strained. Let's talk about your personal life. You've been very private over the years. Some people say that's because you're hiding something. Care to comment? The audacity of the pivot was breathtaking. Keanu stared at her for a long moment, and when he spoke, his voice carried a weight that seemed to fill the entire studio. Joy, do you hear yourself right now? You just accused me of being manipulative for defending myself against your attacks. And your response is to make an even more personal and baseless accusation. You're suggesting I'm hiding something criminal or shameful simply because I don't share every detail of my private life with strangers. That's not what I said, Joy protested, but her voice was weak. It's exactly what you implied, and you know it. You said some people say, as if that gives you permission to repeat gossip and innuendo without taking responsibility for it. That's not journalism. That's tabloid manipulation. Joy's co-host Whoopi tried to intervene. Maybe we should take a quick break. And no, Keanu said firmly, his eyes never leaving Joy's face. I think the audience deserves to see how this conversation ends. Joy started something here, and I think she should finish it. You wanted to have a tough conversation about responsibility and influence. Let's have it. Let's talk about the responsibility that comes with your platform. Joy seemed to realize she was trapped. Every path forward led to more exposure of her unprofessional behavior. I don't know what you want from me, she said. And for the first time, her voice sounded genuinely uncertain. I want you to acknowledge what you've done here today, Keanu said calmly. I want you to admit that you invited me on this show not to have a conversation, but to tear me down for entertainment. I want you to acknowledge that you've spent the last 25 minutes demonstrating exactly the kind of toxic behavior you claim to be against. I was doing my job, Joy said, but the words sounded hollow even to her. Your job is to bully guests. Your job is to make unfounded accusations. Your job is to attack people personally when they don't respond the way you want them to. Keanu's voice remained calm, but each question landed like a precision strike. Because if that's your job, then maybe you should consider whether that job is worth doing. Joy's face was flushed now, her composure completely shattered. You don't get to come on my show and tell me how to do my job, your show. Keanu raised an eyebrow. I thought this was The View, not the Joy Behar Power Trip Hour. And I'm not telling you how to do your job. I'm pointing out that what you've been doing today isn't journalism. It's performance art designed to make you feel superior at someone else's expense. That's enough, Joy said, her voice rising to nearly a shout. I don't have to sit here and listen to this. No, you don't, Keanu agreed. You could apologize. You could acknowledge that you've behaved unprofessionally. You could admit that you made assumptions and attacked me based on those assumptions rather than facts. You could demonstrate the kind of integrity you claim to value. Joy stared at him, her mouth opening and closing like she was trying to form words that wouldn't come. The silence stretched on, filled only by the hum of studio equipment and the barely audible whispers of a stunned audience. Or, Keanu continued, his voice gentle but implacable, you could continue to demonstrate that when someone calls you out on your behavior, your response is to double down and become even more hostile. The choice is yours, Joy, but whatever you choose, everyone watching will see exactly who you really are. The words seemed to hit Joy like a physical blow. She looked around the studio at her co-hosts, at the cameras, at the audience, as if suddenly realizing that her moment of being exposed was being broadcast to millions of people. Her hands were shaking slightly as she reached for her water glass. She started, then stopped. This is ridiculous. I'm not going to sit here and be lectured by someone who makes a living pretending to be other people. There it is again, Keanu said, and there was almost compassion in his voice. Now, when you can't defend your actions, you attack the person pointing them out. When you can't engage with the substance of what I'm saying, you try to diminish me by dismissing my profession. Do you see the pattern, Joy? Do you understand what you're doing? Joy stood up abruptly, her chair scraping against the floor. I don't have to tolerate this kind of disrespect on my own show. What disrespect? Keanu asked, remaining seated, his voice calm. I haven't called you names. I haven't made assumptions about your character. I've simply held up a mirror and shown you your own behavior. If you find that disrespectful, maybe the problem isn't with the mirror. Joy was backing away from the table now, her microphone still clipped to her blouse. This interview is over. The interview was over the moment you decided to attack me instead of having a conversation, Keanu replied. I'm just the one with enough self-respect to point it out. Joy fumbled with her microphone, her hands shaking with rage and humiliation. I quit, she said loud enough for the entire studio to hear. She ripped off her microphone and stormed toward the exit, leaving her bewildered co-hosts staring after her. Keanu remained seated, watching her go with an expression that mixed sadness with resolve. As the studio door slammed behind Joy, Keanu turned to face the camera directly. I came here today to talk about a movie, he said quietly. Instead, I ended up having a conversation about how we treat each other, about the difference between asking hard questions and attacking people, about the responsibility that comes with any platform, whether it's a talk show or a movie screen. I hope people watching this will think about that difference. The camera held on his face for a moment longer before cutting to a stunned Whoopi, who looked like she was trying to figure out how to salvage what remained of the show. And that's how one of Hollywood's most private and polite actors ended up causing one of daytime television's most dramatic walk-offs, simply by refusing to accept being treated with disrespect and having the courage to call it out when it happened. What did you think of Keanu's handling of the situation? Was he right to stand up for himself so forcefully? Or should he have just taken the high road and stayed quiet? Let me know in the comments below. And don't forget to subscribe for more incredible behind-the-scenes stories from Hollywood and beyond.